Okay, so if you have a little look around this lovely pond, you'll notice that while the trees may look green on the face of it, if we actually go and zoom in, you may notice just a couple of leaves have gone a little bit yellow. Now I know what you're thinking, this man is crazy. Maybe, but don't lie that you didn't see those two little yellow leaves, and you know what that means when there's two little yellow leaves. I've got 3 letters for you. PSL, baby. Yeah, that's right. So even though it may be warm today, I'm telling you, give it a few little weeks and I'm going to get to be sipping on pumpkin spice lattes, which means, well, actually I was thinking about this the other day. You know, why don't we make a pumpkin spice latte a chord? Because isn't that just a fantastic idea? Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, the first question is, what exactly is a pumpkin spice latte? Apart from just a really expensive drink that they sell at Starbucks. So, you know, if you had a pumpkin spice latte, you'll know that it's obviously a latte, which is milk and coffee, but it's got this secret little pumpkin spice. So the first question is really to work out what is in the secret pumpkin spice. Now, I've been doing some research online and I found out that there are 5 key secret ingredients in the pumpkin spice. So those are as follows. So the first one is cinnamon. Now I've got here a little bit of cinnamon bark essential oil, which is a raw material we can use in perfumery. Dip that at 10% on the scent strip, and cinnamon, no surprise, smells like cinnamon, which is that kind of lovely, spicy, Christmassy smell that you get. And I really love cinnamon. It's one of my favorite smells. It's just so nice. It's warm, it's kind of exciting, it's a bit spicy. Well, it is spicy. It's kind of like the definition of, I would say, of a sweet, warm, spicy note. And it's often used in various incenses and things like that. I think it's just a lovely smell. The second ingredient in a pumpkin spice is ginger. Now I've got some lovely ginger oil here. And what does it smell like? This is actually made by a really nice quality manufacturer. And ginger essential oil, it smells like ginger. And this is pretty much all the case for these spicy essential oils. But it smells like a very bright, fresh, kind of zingy ginger. Now the difference between ginger and cinnamon is that while both are kind of fiery, let's say warming in a sense spices, you'll find that the cinnamon is much more what we call eugenolic in perfumery. So it's more that like woody warmth, whereas the warmth in ginger is different. It's more of a fiery kind of sharper warmth. And I find that ginger is actually, it's fresh and it's sharp. It shares to my nose more characteristics of something like lemon, whereas cinnamon is actually close to clove. Talking of which is our next thing. So here I've got some clove bud essential oil. And unsurprisingly, just like the other two, it smells like clove bud. And clove is similar in a little sense to cinnamon, though I find clove is a bit more oily, it's a bit more woody, it's a bit more dry, whereas cinnamon is a bit more sweet. Okay, so fourthly, we have nutmeg. Again, another spice. And nutmeg, I think, has got quite a unique smell. It's very distinctive. And I believe this is on certain foods like some custard tarts and things like that. So you may recognize this spice as well. But this is another one of the ones in pumpkin spice. And then final one is something called allspice. Now this actually has another name called pimento, and that's what I've got here, pimento essential oil. And when you smell it, it does smell like allspice. And actually allspice is quite close again to clove. It's another one of those kind of eugenolic, what we call spices. So if you don't know what that is, there's a molecule called eugenol. And this is kind of common in a lot of these spices. So actually this causes a lot of these smells, or it's a big part of a lot of the smells, which is one of the reasons a lot of these sit nicely in the same kind of what we call spicy category of raw materials. But essentially it is a molecule that looks like that. So it's an aromatic ring with some other little bits around it. Actually not that far off of vanillin, but definitely far off enough for this to smell kind of deep and woody and spicy instead of just sweet. Okay, so that's the main pumpkin spice, but what about the other little bits to make it into a pumpkin spice latte? Well, one of the things obviously is coffee. And the best way to get a coffee smell in perfumery is really simply to use something called coffee absolute, because coffee is a very complex smell with lots of different kind of molecules that come from the roasting process, which means if you want a realistic coffee smell, essentially really the only way to do that easily is to just extract the real thing, because trying to reconstruct that complex smell is extremely difficult. So here we've got some coffee absolute, and what does it smell like? I actually did a video last autumn using coffee absolute to make a perfume, so if you're interested in that, then go and watch it. It smells like coffee. It doesn't smell absolutely perfect like kind of crisp fresh coffee, but it does smell very much like coffee. To me it's kind of, you know, it's that dark kind of deep, very distinctive coffee smell, and pretty much the best you're going to get. Then aside from that, we need something for the milk. Now milk is, I find, a bit of a tricky smell to get right in perfumery. I don't know of any way to get it really accurately, but I have got this one lovely aroma chemical here called milk lactone. And why does it smell perfectly like realistic milk? What it smells a bit like is the milk that's often used in sweets flavorings, if you know that kind of thing. And to me, well, it smells fairly milky, milk-like, and it's nice and sweet as well. So this is kind of, for me, the best way to get a milk smell. And also, I do think sometimes when you go to shops with lots of candles and you smell these various like gourmand autumny scents, things like pumpkin spice candles and, you know, cinnamon cookie candles, all that other kind of stuff, you often smell something that smells like this milk lactone in them. So I think it is a good, you know, it's a good raw material to use if you're looking for that kind of gourmand, sweet, milky smell. Finally then, we need a sugar or caramel note. Now, I cover a list of these kinds of notes in my online course. I also made a video last year where I went through kind of a caramel category of raw materials. So if you're interested in the different types of notes that you would want to maybe use for, like, if you're trying to make the effect of sugar or caramel or something like that, then I'll put a link to that other video in the description so you can go and watch it. But essentially, you really just want to pick a sugary note from that, and that is going to essentially act like the sugariness in the pumpkin spice syrup, because when you make a pumpkin spice latte, a pumpkin spice usually is not just kind of dry spice powder. Usually a coffee shop will have that as part of a sweet sugary syrup, and when you get the drink and you drink it, it's going to be very sweet. So what you want is a sweet sugary kind of caramel note in the accord to go and emulate that. So I've picked out maple lactone right here, which smells a little bit like kind of sweet maple syrup. Yeah, very nice maple syrupy smell. But there's a load of other ones you could use here as well. Like you could use caramel acetate, ethyl maltol, and there's some other ones too. So that's essentially the 8 bits you need to make a pumpkin spice latte accord. And I've got all of those scent strips that we just dipped there now in my hand. And if we put them all together, the question is, does it smell like pumpkin spice latte? And the answer is, surprisingly, yes, it does. It actually does, which is good, because otherwise, you know, I wouldn't know what to do. But it does smell like pumpkin spice latte. And I actually tried this out last night because, you know, sometimes I actually do some little preparation for the videos. And what I found is straight away, it smells too spicy. Straight away, the kind of spicy notes, they just overpower, and it makes it smell more like a spice market than a pumpkin spice latte. But as those start to die down, because all of these spicy essential oils, you've got to remember, are top to mid notes. So they don't last that long. They do die down fairly quickly. And the other things like the sugary side, the sugary notes, and the coffee absolute and the milk lactone, they last a little bit longer. So once the spicy notes have started to die down and they become a more subtle level, the other things start to show through. And then, you know, after about half an hour or so on these scent strips, then it suddenly starts to smell more and more like a pumpkin spice latte. So it's good because it does smell like a pumpkin spice latte, which is really cool. So what I thought we would do is actually now try to go and make a test blend, because I haven't actually tried that yet. So we'll be doing this for the first time and see if we can make an accord which smells like a pumpkin spice latte. So The kind of key thing to note here that I found is because these spicy notes are very strong, and this is actually something that should come as no surprise if you've been doing perfumery for any amount of time, these spicy essential oils, they do have the ability to overpower very easily. And when you see them used in perfume formulas, usually they use at very low amounts, and that's presumably because, well, from experience I can tell you, if you use them as if they were another raw material that you might use at a higher amount, then it does just make your whole perfume smell like a spice market. So what we're going to do is I'm going to try to make an accord which I think is going to be based around the kind of coffee and sugary notes in terms of the actual amount of stuff is going to be higher. And it's not because I necessarily need those to dominate, but just so that they balance out and that they're not overpowered by the spices. We'll just put in a touch of the spices, and hopefully overall we'll actually get a nicely balanced smell where you can smell all of the elements and they come together nicely. So the other question is what ratio to put the spices in. When I was looking online, from what I could see in people's pumpkin spice recipes, because that's a good place to look for this kind of thing, I could see that usually cinnamon is used a bit more, and to me that makes sense because cinnamon it's a sweeter spice, and it's a very, you know, you're not meant to say the word just nice in perfumery because it's not very good descriptive, but honestly cinnamon is, you know, it's just such a, it's not sharp, I would say. That's what makes it so pleasant. It's not that kind of aggressive spice like some of the other things, because things like especially the ginger and the allspice, they can have power to really kind of shout over everything else, whereas cinnamon I think usually sits more nicely. And then the other spices, it seems like ginger usually is used somewhere in the middle because it's a kind of core part, and the other spices like the allspice, the nutmeg and the clove, apparently they usually use a bit less because they're just so loud. So I'm going to put together a trial formula. We're going to go and weigh it out and see what it smells like. Okay, right, so I've put together a little formula. So we're going to weigh it out and I'm going to talk you through the different parts of it. So the first thing is some coffee absolute, and I'm doing 1.8 grams at 10%. So we're going to make a 5 gram formula. If you've watched some of my videos before, you probably know that 5 grams is the main trial size that I like to do. So we're going to have 1.8 grams of coffee absolute at 10%. And that means it's going to be about 2/3 overall. So if you think about it in real life, a pumpkin spice latte is going to be, well, it's kind of like a third coffee, a third milk and a third pumpkin spice. Obviously not in terms of actual volumes, but let's imagine the smells kind of, you know, it's all of those three mixing together. Now that doesn't mean that we actually want them to be a third, but this in this formula is going to be the largest thing. So I want to make sure that the coffee, you can actually smell it. And it is something I remember from before, that it's not always the strongest because it's more of a base note, it doesn't project as much. So we want to make sure there's a good amount of the coffee absolute in there. Okay, so 1.8 grams of that. And then we're going to go on to the caramel acetate, and that is going to be 1.5 grams at 10%. So for this one, caramel acetate is a little bit stronger than coffee absolute, but I really want to make sure we smell this, because when I was putting everything together on the scent strips, I felt that we've got all of these notes which are quite dry and spicy, or even nutty in the case of the coffee. They're all quite, let's say a little bit, I wouldn't say bitter, but they're quite, well, they're not the opposite of sweet. And that's fine, but when you have a pumpkin spice latte, you'll notice that it is usually very, very sweet and full up with sugar. So I wanted to make sure that that sugary smell is quite prominent, and caramel acetate does really smell like caramel. So I feel like that's a good option for that. We could have used other things like ethyl maltol, but I thought maybe we can save that till later on if we actually put a perfume with it, because that's useful for structuring a perfume. There's also some maple lactone, which I'll put in at the end. Anyway, the next thing is the biggest spice, and that is cinnamon. So I've got some cinnamon bark essential oil. Here we're going to go for 0.5 grams at 10%. So this one is our first spice, and I find this is the kind of least shouty or easiest to work with out of the spices, and the one we kind of want to be most prominent. So out of all the spices, this is going to be the largest amount that we have by quite some way. So this ends up being, well, 10% of our accord. which, you know, I'm thinking is a bit of a middle ground because it's not as much as the coffee Absolute. It's about 3 times less than that. But, you know, this stuff is going to be stronger anyway, so it should be a similar smell that you actually get. But it's not going to be so weak like some of the other spices. You know, hopefully it's somewhere in the middle. So next we've got ginger. Now for ginger, we are now going to start to go down in the amount. So now we're only going to use 0.2 grams at 10%. And this is a really nice ginger oil I've got here. But the thing is, it's just a lot louder than cinnamon. So I just want to make sure that it doesn't, you know, overpower the whole formula. So just a little bit of that. And then after that, we've got our milk lactone. Now, lactones are actually pretty strong. However, milk lactone, I don't believe, is an actual lactone. So we don't need to dose it necessarily as low as you might otherwise think. So for this, again, we're going to put 0.2 grams, just see what it's like. Because, you know, it's hard to dose this stuff, actually. I haven't used it enough to really know. But it seems to me like you can use it either in lower or higher amounts, depending on how strong you want its smell to be. So I'm going to test it around this level for now. Okay, so then we've got the other spices, and these ones are just kind of the final spices, let's say, that we just want to have a little bit of character in there, but we're hoping that they don't dominate too much, just enough to complete that unique pumpkin spice smell signature. So we've got clove here. We're just going to put in 0.1 grams at 10%. And then we're going to do the same. And then we're going to do the same for nutmeg and the pimento or the allspice. Now for the allspice, I'm not sure if it's better to maybe have the berries, the dried berries, as opposed to the leaf, which I've actually got here. I'm not an expert on allspice or pimento. So if the accord goes well, then maybe that's something to look at in a bit more detail in the future. Then to finish off at the end, I'm going to add a little bit of maple lactone because that stuff is very strong. This stuff is going to be, I'm going to use this time a 1% dilution and just use 0.5 grams. So I'm hoping that this is going to help us give that maple syrup sweetness without too much of that fenugreek kind of note that you get when it's at a higher level. We'll just have to see how it turns out. So there we go, that's the first trial, and obviously all those numbers have just been pulled out of the blue. These are just first guesses, so you know, they may not be right, we'll see. And of course, we got to label the bottle as well, so we don't forget what it is. So there we go, we got our pumpkin spice latte called Trial 1. Now let's go and smell it. Okay then, well I've got the blend here. So the question is, what does it smell like? Is it any good? So yeah, it smells, the pumpkin spice does smell like pumpkin spice. It smells like the right kind of thing. You know, it smells like a pumpkin spice. And then the coffee, you can smell the coffee coming through as well, which is good. And you can smell some of the sweetness. I think the balance is not too bad, though I think it probably does want a bit of rebalancing. But overall, I do get all of the 3 elements that we put in, kind of the sweet sugariness, the coffee and the pumpkin spice. To be fair, the milkiness, not so much. So maybe we need to try to go a bit higher on the milk lactone or find another kind of note in that direction, but that's okay. So yeah, in a sense, it's good, but it's not perfect. So if the good thing is, it smells like a pumpkin spice latte, and if you want a pumpkin spice latte accord, then this is a good start for sure. The bad is, well, at least what I've got here, it's still a little bit sharp and a little bit spicy. And actually, when I smell into this, I don't think it is just the fact that the spices are necessarily too strong. I think the problem with this is that, you see, what I can smell is quite a few off notes. So some of the spices, they're quite sharp, they're quite pungent, and they're quite loud, and there's kind of slight, there's kind of slight off notes as well, which is something you frequently get. And I believe the culprit is because the spices I actually use for that blend are actually pretty much mostly low quality naturals. Now, the reason for this is because those spices are not very common. So they're never really something I've had to, really had any reason to look for a nice version of. I've only got kind of really basic mass market versions of, I think, 4 of those 5 spices, because I just needed them once for a project and I had to find it somewhere and pick it up quick. And to find those, nicer high quality perfumery versions of those naturals is a bit more unusual. They're a bit more expensive. I just haven't had a reason to ever go and obtain them. Now, this is very relevant actually to the video I did the other week about sourcing. If you watch that video, where I basically said that the quality of what you can make in perfumery is often a little bit tied to the stuff you put into it. And this is a case in point example of how, sourcing or the quality of your naturals that you put in especially can affect the quality of what you get out. Because while I can see in this case that we could rebalance our pumpkin spice latte, we could maybe add a bit more of a milky side to it, the main egregious thing that's stopping this from being a really, really nice and well-balanced accord is actually, I believe, the spices themselves, because they've got all of these off notes. And if I go through and smell those spices, some of them are a bit sharp, especially the cinnamon I've got, for example. It's not a good quality cinnamon oil, which funnily enough is actually something I'm trying to stock at the moment, though 2 of the suppliers that I was using don't have cinnamon oil for some reason in stock at the moment. Anyway, no problem. But the point is there's all of these kind of sharp notes, which is quite common for cheap essential oils. And essentially this is, I would say, ruining the blend. It's ruining the ability for us to compose that nice, smooth, balanced, complex but tasteful pumpkin spice latte accord. More so, I think, at the moment than the balance, because I can smell the elements and they do smell roughly right. It's just the overall, let's say, quality of the smell. It's kind of, the blend is kind of there, and I could balance it better. But I kind of think at this stage, what's the point? Because if we're going to do this, then we might as well do it a bit more properly. So probably to continue this, and that's something that I would like to do because I do like pumpkin spice latte and I do like the smell. Probably the best thing for me to do would be to actually see if I can get some better quality of some of these oils, especially the cinnamon, but maybe, for example, the nutmeg as well. Instead of clove oil, we could just try using eugenol. Maybe a nice one for the allspice as well. I'm not sure how common that is actually. And then the ginger is actually already a nice quality oil. So I think that is the call of action, or the kind of the plan here. And I think even just using better quality naturals and then making the same blend will already give us a lot of progress. And then we can go from there and try to balance it. So obviously I cannot do that in this video. But something that I would like to do, if I could manage to get that done, would be to make maybe a little pumpkin spice perfume, because, why not? So definitely let me know if you would be interested in either seeing a video about me making a pumpkin spice perfume, or maybe if I were to put little samples of whatever I come up with, if I come up with it, into my Zurai brand, for example, at the moment, because this is not something that I've got planned, but I would like to do it. So it sounds fun. So if I can get an excuse to spend the time on it, then that would be great. So all in all, conclusions of this video. If you want to make a pumpkin spice accord, this is what you need to do. So this is the right kind of stuff. And if you put it all together, you will get something that smells like pumpkin spice. In terms of perfecting a pumpkin spice accord, if you really want it to smell, extremely nice and yummy and realistic, that's the next level of challenge. So then obviously you're going to want to make sure that you've got nice quality of these ingredients, and then you go and spend a bit more time balancing them. And I do believe that you should be able to achieve a better result than what we've already got here. Although saying that, for a very basic caricature, just a simple kind of pumpkin spice smell, it does kind of start to tick the boxes. Hopefully I will find some time to keep working on that at some point. And if you guys are interested in making your own pumpkin spice latte or just pumpkin spice perfume, because as I said at the start of the video, autumn is kind of just about coming. I mean, You just need to nudge it along a little bit. So the more of us that make pumpkin spice accords, surely that's going to inspire and entice the rest of autumn to just come, surely. So yeah, I hope you found this video useful. That's how to make a pumpkin spice accord, and I'll see you next time with some more perfumery stuff.